You know that strange moment when you're at a party, surrounded by laughter, conversations flowing, people connecting effortlessly, and yet you feel completely disconnected. It's like you're there physically, but emotionally, you're standing behind glass, watching everything happen from the outside. You smile, you nod, you try to engage, but inside, there's just nothing. Or worse, exhaustion before you even got there. And then the thought creeps in, what's wrong with me? Why does something so natural for everyone else feel so draining for you? Why does small talk feel like a performance instead of a connection? If you've ever questioned yourself in moments like this, you're not alone, and more importantly, you're not broken. For a long time, people like you have been labeled as antisocial, too quiet, or even emotionally distant. Maybe you've told yourself the same story, that you just don't fit, that something in you is missing. But what if that's not true at all? What if the issue isn't that you're lacking something, but that you're wired differently? There's a growing body of psychology that suggests some people experience the social world in a fundamentally deeper, more complex way. And that difference doesn't make connection impossible, it just makes shallow connection unsatisfying. You're not failing at relationships. You may simply be part of a smaller group that approaches them in a completely different way. This isn't just a comforting idea, it's backed by research. Studies from institutions like Harvard and Stanford have spent decades exploring what actually shapes human connection and well-being. What they've found challenges a lot of common assumptions. It's not about how many people you know or how often you socialize, it's about how deeply you experience those interactions. Brain imaging, long-term behavioral studies, and psychological research all point to the same conclusion. Some individuals process social and emotional information more intensely than others. And that difference can make everyday interactions feel heavier, more complex, and sometimes more draining, but also far more meaningful. The first trait is something psychologists often call deep processing. This means your mind doesn't just skim the surface of interactions, it dives all the way in. While others might casually move through conversations, your brain is picking up on tone, body language, subtle pauses, and unspoken meaning. You're not just hearing words, you're interpreting intent. It's like your mind is constantly connecting dots, analyzing layers, and trying to understand what's really going on beneath the surface. And because of that, even simple social moments can feel mentally intense. In real life, this can look like replaying a conversation hours or even days after it happened. You might analyze a single text message, wondering what the other person really meant, or catch yourself noticing small shifts in someone's energy that others completely miss. While people around you seem to move on quickly, your mind keeps processing, questioning, and revisiting. It's often labeled as overthinking, but for you, it doesn't feel optional, it feels automatic, like your brain is wired to go deeper, whether you want it to or not. But here's the shift that changes everything. This isn't a flaw, it's depth. What looks like overthinking from the outside is actually your mind engaging with the world on a much deeper level. You're not stuck in your thoughts. You're exploring them more fully than most people ever do. And that kind of depth naturally makes surface-level interactions feel unsatisfying. You're not too much, you're just built for conversations and connections that carry meaning. The challenge isn't fixing your mind, it's finding environments and people that match its depth. The second trait is a strong preference for quality over quantity in relationships. You're not interested in having a long list of acquaintances or casual connections just for the sake of it. Instead, you value a small circle of people you truly trust and feel understood by. While others may easily call someone a friend after a few interactions, you take your time. You're selective, intentional, and careful about who you let into your world. And even though that can sometimes make your social circle look smaller from the outside, the connections you do build tend to be deeper, more meaningful, and far more real. Research actually supports this way of connecting. A study by researcher Jeffrey Hall found that it takes roughly 200 hours of meaningful interaction to develop a close friendship. 200 hours, that's time, presence, shared experiences, and emotional investment. So, when you don't feel close to someone after a few conversations or casual hangouts, that's not a failure on your part, it's reality. Deep connection isn't instant, and your standards simply reflect that truth. You're not slow to connect, you're just unwilling to label something as real before it truly is. The third trait is known as heightened sensitivity, and it plays a huge role in how you experience the world. Some people are simply wired to feel more emotion, more nuance, more intensity in everyday interactions. Psychologist, Dr. Elaine Aron identified this in what she calls highly sensitive people, a group that makes up about 1,520% of the population. Their brains actually process emotional and sensory input more deeply. This means conversations aren't just conversations, they carry emotional weight. Environments aren't just spaces, they affect your energy. You don't just notice what's said, you feel what's behind it. And while this depth can be overwhelming at times, it also means you experience life with a level of awareness that many people never reach. A simple way to understand this is through a comparison. Most people experience life in standard definition while you're operating in high definition. Where others might miss subtle shifts in tone or mood, you pick them up instantly. A slight change in someone's voice, a pause in their response, the energy in a room, you feel it all. It's like your emotional radar is always on, constantly scanning and interpreting signals. That level of awareness can be exhausting, especially in social settings, but it also gives you a depth of perception that allows for incredibly meaningful connections when you find the right people. The fourth trait is self-sufficiency, and it's often misunderstood. You don't rely on constant validation from others to feel okay. You're not looking for someone to complete you, fix you, or fill an emotional gap. You already feel whole on your own. Because of that, you don't chase relationships out of loneliness or fear of being alone. You choose them carefully, based on whether they genuinely add value to your life. But from the outside, this can be misread. People might assume you're distant, uninterested, or even cold. In reality, you're just grounded. You don't need constant reassurance, and that independence makes you selective, not disconnected. Because of this self-sufficiency, people often misunderstand you. They may see your independence as distance, your calmness as disinterest, or your boundaries as coldness. In a culture that often equates constant communication with care, your quiet confidence can feel unfamiliar to others. But the truth is, you're not emotionally unavailable, you're just not performing connection for the sake of appearances. You don't engage out of obligation, and you don't pretend closeness where it doesn't exist. What others misread as cold is often just clarity. You know who you are, and you're not afraid to stand on your own. The fifth trait isn't about how you're wired, it's about what you've been through. At some point in your life, you likely experienced moments that taught you to be careful with trust. Maybe it was inconsistency from someone you depended on, a friendship that ended when you needed it most, or a relationship that made you question your worth. Experiences like these don't just disappear, they shape how your mind approaches connection. Your brain learns patterns, your nervous system becomes alert, and you begin to protect yourself in subtle ways. You may take longer to open up, observe more before trusting, or keep a certain emotional distance until someone proves they're safe. That's not weakness, it's adaptation. You didn't become guarded for no reason. You learned, you adjusted, and now you move through relationships with awareness that was earned the hard way. But here's the part that matters most, and it's not always easy to face. There's a difference between protecting your energy and avoiding connection altogether. One comes from self-respect, the other from fear. Choosing solitude because it brings you peace is healthy, but using it as a shield to avoid vulnerability can quietly turn into isolation. The line between the two is thin, and only you can tell where you stand. So, the real question becomes, are you setting boundaries to protect your well-being, or are you keeping people out because connection feels too risky? Awareness of that difference is what separates growth from stagnation. If any part of this resonated with you, hear this clearly. There is nothing wrong with you. You're not broken, you're not too distant, and you're definitely not bad at relationships. You're simply wired for depth in a world that often rewards surface. You think deeply, feel intensely, and choose carefully, and that combination is rare. It may make connection slower, but it also makes it more meaningful when it happens. So, don't rush yourself, and don't force relationships that don't feel right. The right people won't be overwhelmed by your depth, they'll appreciate it. And if this made you feel seen, stay with me. Follow or subscribe, because there's more to explore, and chances are, you'll recognize yourself in it too.